All right, good stuff. All right, we're going to play a quick game here called Busts Agree or Disagree. I'm going to read Jamie's bust list to Dan and Dan's to Jamie, and tell me agree or disagree. All right, Dan, agree or disagree? Davante Adams as 12th overall, wide receiver 8, bust.
Agree.
DK Metcalf, 15th overall. Number 15 wide receiver, 29th overall. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Deebo Samuel.
15th overall will be the biggest bust.
Yeah, right. So, by the way, Fantasy Pros ADP right now, wide receivers go higher than running backs. For example, Aaron Jones, Rashad White is going 86th, and he's RB 27. George Pickens is going 12 picks earlier than Rashad White, and he's wide receiver 39, 12 spots later in the rankings. So just keep that in mind. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver 17, 34th overall.
Push for me.
DeAndre Hopkins, basically the same, wide receiver 18.
I will agree with Jamie on that.
Mike Williams, wide receiver 25.
This one I don't agree on.
Derrick Henry, running back 8, 25th overall.
Don't agree.
Breece Hall, RB 11, 30th overall.
There's such a boom. The ceiling and the floor here is so wide. I'm just gonna push again.
Okay. Ken Walker, RB 16, 53rd
Agree.
overall. Okay.
Strong agree.
So RB 16 is usually going earlier than 53rd overall. It's like I like him at 53rd, I think. I don't even know, but RB 16, that's not 53rd in our drafts, in most drafts. George Kittle, tight end 4, 60th overall.
Agree.
All right. These are Dan's busts. Jamie, agree or disagree? Travis Etienne, RB 14, 42nd overall.
Disagree.
George Pickens, wide receiver 39, 74th overall.
Disagree.
Rashad White, RB 27, 86th overall.
Disagree.
Aaron Rodgers.
I have to make a strong case today for all these guys.
Well, I mean, just the values are very good on these guys.
QB 16, Aaron Rodgers.
Again, disagree. The value.
RB 17, Aaron Jones.
Disagree.
QB 11, Dak Prescott.
Disagree.
Marquise Brown, 29, wide receiver 29.
I think that's exactly where I have him ranked. So disagree.
All right, interesting. All right, so how about
if his foot is a problem, then that's going to be an easy agree.
His foot is always a problem.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, why don't you give a bust case, your favorite bust case?
We're starting this already? Okay. Favorite bust case is Travis Etienne. You've heard me talk about Travis Etienne a lot on this podcast. I'll continue to. So the good with Etienne is he's still an elite forced tackle misser. I want to start with the good. That was what he was in college. He still is. He had almost 1,500 yards last year, 5 touchdowns. The bad with Travis Etienne is what he did last year when James Robinson was actually in the mix. He was a back-end RB2, and when he wasn't in the mix, he was an RB1. Now, the Jaguars went and tried to get Darrell Henderson. That didn't work last year. They got Jermichael Hasty. That didn't really work. Now they've got Tank Bigsby, who they drafted with second-day capital in the draft, who I like a lot. They also signed D'Ernest Johnson, which has gone under the radar. So the competition thing is back. Without the volume, I'm really not sure where Etienne is going to be a consistent scorer, because Etienne is graded out as, according to Pro Football Focus, one of the worst receiving backs in the entire NFL last year. The big factor that were the drops. He also had 5 fumbles, including one that went through the end zone against the Giants to take away a score. The red, so in addition to not having much work at all in the passing game last year, being one of the worst receiving backs in the NFL last year, according to Pro Football Focus, the Jaguars also added Calvin Ridley. I don't think we're going to see this offense regress to Lawrence checking down more to the running backs or them featuring more running backs in the passing game. I think we're going to see him throw more to the receivers. Then we look at the red zone, which is another major flag to me. He converted just 20% of his goal line carries. That was one of the worst marks in the entire NFL. Tank Bigsby could take over that role. D'Ernest Johnson could. I don't know, but I just don't see him being a better back in that regard. We also look at some weird red flags for Travis Etienne, like last year in the divisional round. And this is a shout out to Ian Hartitz, because I saw him tweet about this. In the divisional round last year, he was out-snapped by Jermichael Hasty. That's just incredibly weird to me with Etienne. And in the past, although he had 255 touches last year, that was actually a career, the highest touches for a single running back for Doug Peterson since he was a head coach dating all the way back to 2016, only once has a running back gotten over 200 touches with Doug Peterson outside of Travis Etienne's season last year. So I don't know if I see the same volume repeating for Etienne. I don't see anything changing in the passing game. If anything, I think it's going to get worse. I think the red zone could go way down here, considering how inefficient he was there. He has a fumbling issue, he has a drop issue. I agree that he is a really fast runner who's actually pretty good at forcing missed tackles, but he's also not a great processing running back from what I've seen on film. And that's just like the cherry on top. But without the passing game work, without the red zone, I just don't know where the production is coming from here.
Yeah, I gave this stat yesterday about him, at least in the red zone. Etienne was 2 of 10 inside the 5-yard line, scoring touchdowns. So Dan mentioned that 20%, you said goal line. I'm just using inside the 5-yard line. So that's bad. But in college also, he converted on he scored a touchdown on 51% of his carries inside the 5-yard line. And that was on 65 carries. Tank Bigsby converted on 71%. So Bigsby might be better suited for that role. Jamie, you do not agree, though, that Travis Etienne should be considered a bust right now as what RB 15, something like that. Sorry.
I think you said 14.
14, yeah. Go ahead.
I am curious, though, because I just finished editing my story, but Dan's drafts in our pick by pick where he took Travis Etienne in round 4.
I took him at the end of round 4. It was like the last pick round 4.
It's great. It's great value. I think he's going to actually end up settling somewhere in the round 3 range in most PPR leagues where it is a 3-receiver league. And so we'll sort of see. And to be honest, I'm getting more concerned about Etienne, where I had him as a top thing. I think I had him when I was just rereading my breakouts from March. I had him as a breakout candidate. I don't feel as strongly because I think Dan makes a lot of valid points. But the thing that I do like about Etienne is really that I love this Jacksonville offense. And I think they're going to just produce a lot of points across the board. And so I think that will allow just incredible scoring for all their top tier talent. Now, does that mean he's going to be the goal line option because Bigsby might be better? Does that mean he's going to be as involved in the passing game because of Calvin Ridley and all the weapons that they have? I think we'll find out. But, you talk about this, Adam, and, I was looking at your notes about Jahmyr Gibbs, how first-round running backs tend to perform. And he is still a first-round running back, despite the fact that he didn't play in his rookie campaign. I know a lot of it was tied to, rookie production. But I think this is going to be one of the better teams in the league. And typically when you get that from a player with his pedigree, he's going to be the one that dominates carries and dominates touches, I should say. So whether he maxes out as one of the top-tier receiving backs, whether he maxes out as one of the top-tier touchdown producers, whether he fulfills, the draft prospect that he was, pegged at coming into the league, and maybe Urban Meyer overdrafting him that season, I still think there's just a lot to like about this scenario. So should he be a top 12 guy? Maybe not. Maybe I have him ranked a little bit too high. Should he be, a guy that goes in early round 3? Again, that's probably debatable depending on how your draft goes. But I still think that he has the upside still to be the best running back on this team and to be still one of the better fantasy running backs. So probably still safe as a number 2 guy.
Yeah. Are you taking Najee Harris or a Lions running back or Miles Sanders or not Aaron Jones? You have him on the buses. Are you taking any of those guys ahead of Etienne?
Yeah, so at least on the list I'm looking at on Fantasy Pros, I guess I was looking at their rankings more than the ADP. The guys that I would take that I think a case can be made, these guys will also be in some drafts drafted after him, because Jamie's right. I think he's only going to go from that into that 3rd round range. So I would take Najee Harris over him. I would take Joe Mixon, who's going after him, over him. I would take Jahmyr Gibbs. I would take J.K. Dobbins over him. Personally, okay. Yeah, I go that far down the list.
Okay, all right, Jamie, make a bust case for someone.
I mean, for me, it's Davante Adams. And this is something that sort of scared me a little bit when I looked at this. I just want to make sure I get the numbers right. So in the last 10 years, receivers that are 30 or older, 10 years, only 17 have averaged 15 PPR points per game. So 10-year span, 17 guys have done that. Only 3, now Adams averaged over 19 PPR points per game, but only 3 were in that range. And that was Brandon Marshall in 2015, Jordy Nelson in 2016, and Antonio Brown in 2018. And so you factor in the decline that's just natural for players at this age. Now, granted, he's still playing at a very high level, as we saw last year, but it took 180 targets for him, I think, to produce at that level. And you add in the fact that it's now Jimmy Garoppolo with a foot injury. assuming Garoppolo misses time, which we know that tends to be the case for him, and they don't add somebody, and you could still see a case for Carson Wentz or Teddy Bridgewater or Joe Flacco or just somebody that's competent, as opposed to what's currently on their roster, which I think would be right now a 37-year-old Brian Hoyer. That just makes it even more scary to say that Davante Adams is still going to be Davante Adams. You know, we always fall into this trap, and I think we're all guilty of it in some way, shape, or form of he's too good, he'll overcome that situation, or he's too talented, he's done this before. Yes, he's talented and he's done it before, but he's also disgruntled with his current situation, you know, and at what point does losing and maybe a couple of weeks of bad production just tend to snowball into an awful situation or a bad situation, making it even worse? So I'm not drafting him in round 1. I'm even getting a little bit concerned about drafting round 2. So I'm probably just going to pass on Adams altogether. He's one of these players that I struggle with on a yearly basis. You know, there's a group of guys where it's almost like you have to rank them in a certain range because I think that's just the expectation. But I'm just not going to draft him. And so for me, Davante Adams is somebody that I'm going to pass on definitely in round 1 and probably pass on in round 2. Like I'll just pivot to running back or tight end or quarterback in that range when Davante Adams comes up on the board.
Okay. So you think that this situation is considerably worse than last year's situation?
Well, especially speaking to the Derek Carr fanboy. Yes, I do. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is, you know, the nice thing about Garoppolo is if he does stay healthy and he's fine, he picks up the system, which you think he has, you know, some understanding of, being he's been with Josh McDaniels before, that there is still a chance for Adams to have his volume up because, you know, Jacoby Myers, Darren Waller, you can say it's a wash just in terms of what the target, you know, share will be. Hunter Renfrow staying healthy, you know, Josh Jacobs, all those things, you know, kind of just sort of balances itself out. I think, you know, if Myers is, you know, stepping into that type of opportunity. The downfield throws, though, are clearly going to be different. You know, it's just not, he's not the same quarterback. Garoppolo's not the same, doesn't throw with the same success down the field. And so while he may get 100 catches for the 4th year in a row, I just don't know if he'll have the same number of touchdowns. And I do think that 180 targets is probably a pipe dream again, even if he is still the number 1 guy.
Yeah, because I was out on him last year in the same way.
So was I.
Yeah. The last 2 games of the season were with the backup quarterback, and he went for 34 points and 12 points in those 2 games. Obviously had that memorable championship week. Derek Carr gets benched, and you're like, what do I do with Davante Adams? What do I do with Davante Adams? 7 catches, 153 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 11 targets against the 49ers. That was the other thing. You know, it was incredible. But all right.
And he beat up the competition. He beat up the Broncos twice. You know, I mean, he's still very good. He's still going to give you quality production. But I think, again, if you're drafting him in round 1, you're expecting not just 15 plus points per game. You're expecting 17, 18 plus points per game for the guys that he's being drafted on. And as you alluded to, the wide receivers are pushed up. He's the 8th wide receiver in the 1st round. You know, so that says a lot. You know, so he's probably more of a round 2 pick. And when I say I'm not drafting him, obviously falls to the right spot, I'm going to draft him. That goes without saying. But just I think at this cost is just too high.
Okay, so I guess let me follow up. Tony Pollard or Davante Adams?
I would take Pollard.
Dan?
Pollard.
How about Garrett Wilson or Adams?
Still Adams right now, but that might change. If Garoppolo's not ready for week 1, Wilson all day.
I'm going to go Garrett Wilson regardless, I think.